Hello, I'm delighted to welcome Simon Scarborough from PE Scholar today for our video. I saw Simon talk at the Heads of PE conference a few months ago and was very impressed. It really sparked my curiosity about diversity, equality and inclusion. And today just want to talk a little bit about school sport. Are we part of the problem or can we be part of the solution? Because we both think that sport can be a great has the potential to be part of the solution here. So Simon, if you want to just open up and share maybe with directors of sport how we think we can be part of the solution here.
Hi, thanks, Chris. So for quite some time now, I've been working in state education as a head of PE and looking at inclusive practice, both in physical education and in our school sports structures. And as you've just said, I think we've got a huge power, and we should be very privileged to be able to be in a position where we could positively influence young people's lives, enrich their lives through the type of experiences that I'm sure myself and yourself had and other directors of sport have had. But not always the case do we meet the needs of that sort of wider range of students. And so I think there's a couple of issues that we could just mention briefly today, and we could spend hours and hours as we already have discussing these issues. So that to not initially not conflate physical education lessons and sport. Sort of PE must be inclusive. Everyone has that right to be in those lessons, to feel safe and to feel valued. But our school sport programs across the country, different schools may have different drivers behind their programs. So it might be there might be a pressure on some sport departments to increase the success of the teams, which can drive directors of sport and coaches to behave in a certain way, train certain ways, to pick certain players for the benefit of the school and the team. But there might be some other people that benefit or don't benefit from that. But there may also be departments, or within the same department, another aspect where we're trying to include more people more often. And that's the route that national governing bodies are going down currently. But we also have, I think, a problem with elite sport, and people that see sport on the television will then make that assumption that that is what school sport is like or should be like. And that's problematic because, one, we know that those in school that it's not the same. If people have this expectation of us as practitioners and professionals, there's a certain pressure on us to do certain things in certain ways, perhaps. But we also see lots of issues in elite sport, such as the homophobia in, for example, men's football. We see inequalities in men's sport and women's sport across pretty much all sports. And so people associate, or can associate, young people particularly, with what they see on television and what they hear in the media with their own experiences of physical education and sport. And the reality is there shouldn't be any homophobia in schools. And so often I sometimes see behaviours that you might see on the terraces, for example, being drawn into maybe the changing rooms and in a sporting context within a school that should be a safe place for people to be active.
So how do you think directors of sport, if we start with diversity, first of all, Simon, how do you think directors of sport and schools could improve the diversity in their PE and their sports programs?
Well, I think it's important to remember that if you are familiar with the Under the Skin research project that Sport England undertook in 2015, they did a big survey on young people, and they categorized young people in 6 different personality types. And one of those was the sport enthusiast. So that person, like myself, maybe like yourself when you were younger, you were confident in a sporting setting, you enjoyed taking part in sport and physical activity. Only 10% of the youth population that they were in part of that research project identified as a sport enthusiast. And so what we are providing for young people can be amazing to those that are already in that place, but may not be appropriate or inclusive towards people that may not be sport enthusiasts. So I think it's just having a look at our provision and seeing kind of life through the lens of young people that may have either protected characteristics or are just different to what we experienced when we were younger. And there might well be directors. I'm not making an assumption here that all directors of sport are, let's say, heterosexual team players that have positive experiences, because that's not necessarily the case. But if you, for example, as the women's sport momentum builds in various sports, both nationally and globally, I've become much more aware of the challenges and the inequalities that women have faced. And so I've done a lot of work, tried to lead and support my female staff to also lead on inclusive work to support girls, because girls face more barriers and more complex barriers than boys do growing up. And so to provide that equity, we need to do more for girls to give them a safe space to exercise and to be active and to engage in appropriate activities. And so even now, having been in the profession quite some time, I'm continually looking at life through the lens of other young people, not like me, those that identify as LGBT, for example, what life is like for them, what messages they're getting from the wider sport world, what might not be allowing them to feel safe and a sense of belonging in PE and sport, and just trying to make some adaptations and actually talking to the students as well. It really helps.
And then when we met last time, we were discussing obviously equality and equity. How can we make sport more, I think, equitable, maybe than equal, and what are the challenges and what are potentially some of the solutions for directors of sport there?
Yeah. So I've just mentioned there about the doing more for the girls. So when the Lionesses had their success a couple of years ago, and there was a big kind of drive for football to be offered in all sports across football to be offered in all schools across the country. I think there was quite a limited narrative. That was, there's a couple of ex-professional footballers and pundits that were putting that forward. Just by offering the same activities that everyone has the same access, it would be equality, but what we need is equity. So we need to make sure that we're doing above and beyond for those people that find access in physical activity and sport more difficult for whatever reason it might be. But also we shouldn't just assume that because the Lionesses is successful, all girls should want to play football and enjoy playing football. Okay, and I heard another great speaker at the conference we were at saying exactly that. It shouldn't just be the case that because that particular sport is becoming more popular for women, girls shouldn't feel the pressure to want to play it. Likewise, boys shouldn't have to want to play football either if that's not their thing as well. So it's about identifying what the barriers are and trying just to unpick those barriers, and that'll be different for different student groups. Even things like our PE kits and what we're wearing for sport, making sure that's inclusive. And I know being part of a working group for the Youth Sport Trust, looking at providing some guidance that can be rolled out across schools across the country to make it more inclusive so everybody feels comfortable. Because again, if you're athletic and you're confident and you've got good body confidence, then you're more likely to be comfortable wearing PE kit. But there's many students who will, for one reason or another, maybe not be comfortable in that prescribed PE kit and would benefit from wider options that may not already be available.
I think that's where the choice is really important, isn't it? I know a lot of schools now will give all pupils the choice to wear a skirt, shorts, leggings, tracksuit bottom, because as we all know, if you're feeling confident or you feel better in what you're wearing, you're going to enjoy sport more, aren't you? So that's an important part as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as well for equity, I think it's about accepting people for who they are. So if we're talking about the LGBT community, for example, young people that might be gender questioning or are trans, if they express themselves in a way that's not like a societal norm for that gender, then we're okay with that. If they have changed names, I know there's some draft guidance that's just closed consultation. So it's kind of pressed pause on this for a little bit. But in terms of accepting people for who they are and then advocating for those people if they do have protected characteristics, think about maybe who gets your first attention when people turn to training or to your lessons. You gravitate towards those that are motivated, that are confident, that want to share their stories about their weekend sporting activities or the last fixture or whatever it might be? Or do you gravitate in your first attention to the child that has less confidence, that may have a disability, that may have body confidence issues and just needs that little bit extra encouragement and support? Because if you're maybe a subconscious bias goes toward those that are more comfortable and you enjoy those interactions, but that could be quite a powerful message to those that you don't say hello to on the way in because you're too busy finding out about their great successes. And that's not to say that you don't have to take an interest in young people's successes. Of course you do want to, and you want to celebrate and share that, but it's just being mindful of that equity. That person probably doesn't need that validation from you because they're champion of whatever county championships or nationals. It's those that don't have that might actually benefit a little bit more from those interactions that you give them in those spaces.
And we were talking beforehand about, ultimately, as director of sport and as school teachers, we want to be able to advocate for all different types of pupils that we have and everybody. And I think the key here is that, we need to educate ourselves. So just to finish there, and we said earlier, Simon, later on we're going to do a webinar for directors of sport that will last 35 to 40 minutes, and then other people can come in and ask questions. But if there was one piece of advice you were offering directors of sport to finish with, what would it be, Simon?
So I think just have an honest reflection about your language and your behaviors, and whether you are yourself conforming to some gender stereotypes within sport, and how that language and those behaviors might have an impact on all students in your care. And some of those may make some people uncomfortable. I've done it with my own language. It's not talk about using bad language or foul language, but I'm adapting from being immersed in the world of sport to being a professional teacher in front of young people. It's quite a subtle change, and not feeling like you have to be any particular model of PE teacher or director of sport. I think is how I'm behaving and what I say and how I say it going to make young people comfortable to come and talk to me, and to make them feel safe and make them want to be part of my lessons and part of my sports programs. And that might require some student voice, but that takes some courage.
Agreed.
But so that self-reflection is a quite a powerful tool.
That's great advice. Thanks, Simon. And as I say, look forward to maybe doing a longer webinar with our members later on in the term or in September. So thanks again for your time, Simon. Really appreciate it, and good to catch up again. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Take care.